with just 3 words sent through a phone. A Tajik man working in Russia can end his marriage while his wife back home continues raising their children alone, working the fields, and waiting for his return. In Tajikistan, roughly 1 out of every 7 people must travel to Russia to earn a living, and the money they send home once accounted for nearly half of the country's entire economy. This is a land where more than 90% of the territory is covered by mountains, with breathtaking peaks rising across the horizon. Soviet. Yet it remains the poorest country in the post-Soviet world. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and tell us in the comments what makes you most curious about Tajikistan. Now let us enter a country held together by separation, hospitality, and an extraordinary ability to endure. Number 15. Tajikistan. When an empire collapsed and a generation of men disappeared. Both countries began their new chapter in 1991. Estonia now produces roughly $32,760 per person, while Tajikistan has been left behind by a gap of nearly 23 times. By 2026, almost 11 million people live in this Central Asian nation, where 93% of the land is mountainous. The Pamir and Tian Shan ranges fill the horizon, while farmland remains scarce. When the Soviet Union collapsed, its factories and subsidies disappeared as well, leaving behind mostly rock and an economy struggling to survive. Among these mountains, Ismoil Somoni Peak rises to nearly 24,600 feet. It was once named after Stalin, then called Communism Peak, before receiving its current name, a lingering trace of an empire that no longer exists. In Dushanbe, a flagpole standing more than 540 feet tall held the world record from 2011 to 2014. Around $3.5 million was spent on the flagpole as part of a project valued at more than $210 million. A poor post-Soviet nation built the tallest flagpole in the world, and that contrast explains much of what comes next. Look around the room where you are sitting, where the heating system works and the lights turn on whenever you touch a switch. In Tajikistan, poverty is only what can be seen on the surface. What this country lacks is not only money, but an entire generation of men. Across Rasht and Katlon, tea houses sit quiet while women tend the fields. So where have all the men gone? Number 14. A country sustained by men living far from home. In Russia, around 1 million Tajik citizens work far from home, equal to nearly 1 out of every 7 people in Tajikistan. Most of them are men between 18 and 60 years old, working on construction sites through brutal winters. The money they sent home once accounted for as much as 45% of the national economy, leaving Tajikistan heavily dependent on remittances. Imagine 7 people standing on your street, and then one of them suddenly disappears while everyone left behind survives on the money that person sends home. The reason is simple. A Tajik man can earn several times more in Moscow than he could back home. When parents become sick, the roof begins to leak, and children need money, homesickness often has to come second. Every month, the future of an entire family is reduced to a number glowing on a phone screen. But distance carries its own price. Of every 3 men who leave for Russia, 1 never returns home to live permanently. A new job, a new city, and sometimes a new family. Back at home, women are left to plow the fields, pick cotton, and clear irrigation canals. Then one day, a wife's phone lights up with 3 words: talak, 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 a message that can end a marriage. This became so common that Tajikistan's Islamic Council declared it invalid under religious law, while the government completely banned divorce by text message. Number 13. A single message that ends an entire marriage. That ban reveals that divorce by text message is far from a rare story. But behind it lies an even more serious problem. Across Tajikistan, many couples hold only a religious nikah ceremony without officially registering their marriage with the state. When the message arrives, a woman may suddenly realize that in the eyes of the law, she was never a wife at all. No financial support, no legal claim to property, and almost no grounds to seek protection time. Even registered marriages can remain trapped in legal disputes for years, because a court cannot complete the divorce if the husband cannot be reached somewhere in Russia. These are not official laws of Tajikistan, but practices that continue to exist in everyday life. Polygamy is still treated as a crime, punishable by up to 5 years in prison or a fine of nearly $10,000. Even so, second wives married only through nikah still exist, while prosecutions remain rare. Look at the phone in your hand. Time. Threes. The same object used to order dinner or message a friend can also end an entire marriage with a single line of text. And this is only one part of the unwritten system of rules surrounding family life in this country.
Number 12. Tajikistan. When the state controls both clothing and the dinner table. Under a new law, clothing considered foreign to Tajik culture, primarily understood to target the hijab, can bring citizens a fine of around $700, while government officials may face penalties exceeding $5,100. What makes this especially striking is that Tajikistan has a Muslim-majority population, yet the state still restricts headscarves, has previously shaved men's beards at checkpoints, and discourages parents from giving children names of Arabic origin. Instead, the government promotes names drawn from the Persian epic Shahnameh, claiming that these measures prevent extremist influence and strengthen the country's Persian identity. That control extends far beyond clothing. Since 2007, the law has also limited the number of guests and the length of weddings, funerals, and even public birthday celebrations. The goal is to prevent families from going into debt simply to host an extravagant gathering. In everyday life, however, Tajik people follow a very different rule. A guest is regarded as a gift from God. Tea is always poured over the dasturkhan before any serious conversation begins. And one proverb says that anyone who has eaten a family's ash must remember that respect for 40 years. On one side, the state controls headscarves and guest lists. On the other, communities make sure even strangers are fed first. Yet these rules are still not the greatest burden people carry. The real hardship begins when winter arrives. Number 11. Tajikistan. Poverty, power outages, and the burden carried by women. By mid-2023, the average monthly salary in Tajikistan was only about 2,227 somoni, equal to nearly $203, or less than $7 a day. By 2026, nearly 15% of the population was still living below the poverty line. Behind those numbers are families forced to choose between coal for heating and meat for dinner, and every October, the lights begin to go out again. Tajikistan depends heavily on hydropower, yet rolling blackouts continue until April. As rivers freeze, reservoirs fall, and turbines slow down, some villages receive electricity for only a few hours each day. Children study by flashlight. At the same time, the Talco aluminum smelter consumes around 40% of the country's electricity. Villages remain in darkness so the plant can keep operating because the foreign currency earned from aluminum is used to buy wheat, fuel, and medicine. It is a bitter choice made for survival. Out in the fields, women carry water, pick cotton, and clear irrigation canals, while most of the men work in Russia. They receive low wages, have little protection, and often lack full control over the money they earn. But if we see Tajikistan only as a tragedy, we still have not seen the whole country.
Beyond the darkness of winter lies a beauty so remarkable that many travelers call this one of the most underrated places on Earth. Number 10. Tajikistan, the roof of the world and the last language of the Silk Road. Beyond the valleys, Tajikistan reveals an entirely different face. Nearly 93% of the country is mountainous, and the Pamir Range has long been known as the roof of the world. Rising above everything, Ismoil Somoni Peak reaches nearly 24,600 feet. Nearby, the Fedchenko Glacier stretches for almost 48 miles and reaches depths of more than 3,000 feet is 3 Cs, making it one of the largest masses of ice outside the polar regions. Cutting through this landscape is the Pamir Highway, a Soviet-built road that winds past turquoise lakes and beneath cliffs rising more than 19,000 feet. Nearby, Tajik National Park covers almost 1/5 of the entire country. But these mountains are not motionless. In 1911, an earthquake sent an entire mountainside crashing into a valley, creating a natural dam more than 1,600 feet high and trapping Lake Ceres behind it. For more than a century, engineers have continued watching for signs that the wall of rock might collapse while the surface of the lake remains perfectly still. In the Fan Mountains, Lake Iskanderkul carries the Persian name of Alexander the Great. Just one valley away, a few hundred people still speak a direct descendant of Sogdian, the language once heard along the Silk Road. Long after empires and trade routes disappeared, that language continues to survive, in villages cut off by avalanches for months each year. You do not need to cross mountain ranges, endure freezing winters, or travel thousands of miles to help us continue this journey. Simply subscribe below and leave the exploration of these distant lands to our team. Number 9. Between the Silk Road and the Tajik dinner table. Why has the world paid so little attention to this place? Partly because the Yaghnab Valley is difficult to reach. Partly because few people imagine that history is still alive in the poorest country of the former Soviet Union. Even Dushanbe tells a story. The capital's name means Monday, taken from the market that once gathered there on that day. In the west, the Silk Road sits behind museum glass, but in Tajikistan, it survives in a valley without paved roads, and in words that few travelers will ever hear. That history did not disappear. The world simply stopped searching for it. Beyond the mountain legends, the character of the Tajik people reveals itself around the Dasturkhan. Dried apricots, almonds, halva, and bread are placed on the table first, followed by tea. The youngest person pours it because a guest is regarded as a gift from God. At the center, ushi palav, also known as plov, is slowly cooked with carrots, onions, and lamb. In 2016, UNESCO recognized this tradition as cultural heritage, with around 200 different variations. Tajik people say that once you have eaten someone's osh, you must honor that bond for 40 years. Inside the choyhona, men cook plov together in enormous cauldrons for weddings and celebrations, welcoming loved ones home. They stir, argue, and sing. Even while earning only around $203 a month, they still place the finest portion in front of a stranger. Number 8. The Tajik Civil War. The wound left behind after independence. In Tajikistan, hospitality is not an expense. It is part of the national identity, a form of wealth that no remittance-based economy can take away or send through a phone. If a mountain family invites you to sit beside the Dasturkhan and share plov from a common plate, that invitation means far more than a meal. But that warmth was once tested by a catastrophe that most of the world has forgotten. Tajikistan gained independence in 1991, and only months later, the country began to fall apart.
From May 1992 to June 1997, a civil war between regional and political factions took the lives of tens of thousands of people, with many estimates placing the death toll close to 100,000. No one counted precisely because, at the time, people were simply trying to survive. Around 1,200,000 people were forced from their homes, equal to somewhere between 1/10 and 1/5 of the population. By the end of 1992, nearly 80% of the country's industrial sector had been destroyed, while almost nothing remained in the south. Between 1992 and 1996, the economy lost more than half of its value, and by 1998, income per person had fallen to just $215. Compared with roughly $1,430 in 2026, Tajikistan remains poor, but it has climbed nearly 7 times higher than the deepest point still remembered by those who lived through it. Number 7. The dam carrying Tajikistan's hope. At this point, the story begins to come full circle. Why does roughly 1 out of every 7 Tajik people work in Russia? Why do so many wives see their husbands only once a year, while some marriages end through a text message? The reason is that an entire generation grew up in an economy shattered by civil war, where the road to Moscow became almost the only available choice. In a sense, those distant separations began in 1992, when around 100,000 people died in a war the world has almost forgotten. But the story does not end in the ashes. Along the Vaksh River, Tajikistan is building the Rogan Dam, which is expected to rise to around 1,100 feet and become the tallest dam in the world. Its turbines are projected to generate roughly the same amount of electricity as 3 nuclear reactors, enough to serve nearly 10 million people. During 2025 and 2026, the dam structure rose by more than 300 feet, while around $3 billion was raised for the project. For a country that regularly loses power during winter, this is not a monument built for display. It is a light switch, still under construction. The Soviet-era Nurek Dam still produces nearly 70% of the country's electricity. At the same time, the economy grew by more than 8% in 2025 and is projected to expand by around 7% in 2026. Number 6. A poor country carrying an ancient culture within it. By 2026, the share of people living on less than $4.20 a day had fallen to 14.8%. Income per person rose from $215 in 1998 to $1,430 in 2026. Tajikistan still ranks last among the former Soviet republics, but it is advancing faster than many of them. Even the Pamir Highway is beginning to bring new opportunities, as more travelers describe it as one of the most memorable road journeys in the world. Time frees in me. But concrete and economic growth alone cannot create national pride. People are the ones who do that. In August 2016, at the Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro, hammer thrower Dilshad Nazarov reached nearly 258 feet and won Tajikistan's first Olympic gold medal. That achievement began during years of hardship, when his mother made training equipment herself because the country had almost nothing available to support him. Tajikistan did not buy a champion time threes, it raised one. That sense of pride reaches even deeper into the country's Persian past. Rudaki, regarded as the father of Persian poetry, was born here in the 9th century. The Somoni currency is named after Ismail Samani, while Shashmakam music and buzkashi remain part of weddings and public celebrations. This is not merely a young and impoverished nation, but an ancient culture that continues to live. Number 5. Dushanbe's Trolleybuses, a Cold War legacy in a greener era. Look above Dushanbe, and you will see electrical wires stretching across the sky like an enormous spider web. Beneath them, trolleybuses still glide quietly through the city streets. This is not a forgotten scene from an old documentary, but a familiar part of everyday transportation in Tajikistan's capital. First introduced in the summer of 1955, the system once represented the Soviet Union's ambition to modernize Central Asia. When the empire collapsed, many cities quickly removed these vehicles, ×3s. But Dushanbe chose to preserve them, repair them, and carry them into a new era. In a country still facing serious economic challenges, these electric buses now run on hydropower generated by rivers flowing from the Pamir Mountains. Many newer models are equipped with backup batteries, allowing them to lower their overhead poles and travel for dozens of miles through areas affected by power outages or without electrical wires above the road. As a result, they are no longer confined to the old network. As the buses move silently beneath rows of green trees, a striking contrast appears. Technology once dismissed as an outdated relic of the Cold War is now helping Dushanbe reduce emissions and move closer to cleaner transportation time. Threes of work. A legacy from the past has ultimately become a ticket carrying this mountain city directly toward the future. Number 4. Fedchenko Glacier, Central Asia's giant water tower. Hidden deep within the Pamir Mountains, where gray rock meets the clouds, the Fedchenko Glacier stretches for nearly 48 miles and reaches depths of more than 3,000 feet in some places. It is the longest glacier in the world outside the polar regions, resembling an immense river of ice, slowly winding through mountains that are almost completely uninhabited. Known since the era of the Russian Empire and named after scientist Alexei Fedchenko, this mass of ice is more than a geological wonder ×13s. It also serves as a natural water tower for much of Central Asia. From elevations above 16,000 feet, melting ice forms small streams that eventually feed into the Amu Darya river system, supplying water to valleys and cotton-growing regions hundreds of miles away. As the climate changes from year to year, Fedchenko has become a visible reminder of how fragile mountain water supplies truly are. Every section of ice that disappears changes more than the landscape. It also affects communities living downstream for generations to come. Standing before that endless white expanse, a person suddenly feels incredibly small. Time veers. The silence, the elevation, and the enormous scale of the glacier make it seem like a piece of the world still untouched by time, while also creating one of the most raw and powerful images of Tajikistan. Number 3. Karakul, a lake formed by a meteorite impact. High on the Pamir Plateau at nearly 13,100 feet, Lake Karakul appears like an enormous sapphire surrounded by barren land. Yet its peaceful beauty began with something far more violent. About 25 million years ago, a meteorite is believed to have crashed into this region, leaving behind an impact crater more than 31 miles wide, a massive scar that can still be seen across the surface of the Earth. In the local language, Karakul means Black Lake, although its water shifts from turquoise to almost completely dark depending on the light. Because it lies inside a closed basin, the lake has no outlet leading to a river or sea. Water escapes only through evaporation, allowing minerals to accumulate over millions of years and turning Karakul into a highly saline lake where very few fish species can survive. Around the shoreline, snow-covered peaks reflect across water as smooth as glass, creating a silence so vast that the lake feels separated from the world and from nearly every familiar trace of human life. Standing beside Karakul, you are not simply looking at a lake on the roof of the world. You are standing inside the remains of an impact from space, where nature has preserved both the violence of the past
and the untouched, lonely, and mesmerizing beauty of Tajikistan. Number 2. Tajikistan, a festival of rebirth and pride. As winter slowly retreats from the peaks of the Pamir Mountains, Tajikistan enters its most vibrant season of the year with the celebration of Nowruz. Rooted in ancient Persian civilization, this holiday marks the spring equinox and the return of life after long months of bitter cold. Across the streets of Dushanbe and throughout the valleys, people wear brightly colored embroidered clothing, sing, dance, and welcome a new beginning time threes, as though the entire country is awakening from winter. Inside family courtyards, large cauldrons of sumanak are slowly cooked from sprouted wheat. Women gather around them through the night, stirring the mixture, singing together, and offering prayers for a successful harvest. Out on the open grasslands, the atmosphere becomes far more intense with buzkashi. Horsemen charge into the contest, struggling to seize the body of a goat as the crowd erupts around them. This is more than a game. It is a display of strength, courage, and horsemanship passed down through generations' time. Threezas. For the Tajik people, Nowruz is not simply a spring festival. It is a moment when the Persian past meets the present, and when food, music, and shared rituals remind people where they come from. Amid the colors and the sound of drums, you can clearly feel the hospitality, resilience, and pride that continue to hold this country together. Number 1. Tajikistan, where parents are legally responsible for their children's education. In Tajikistan, making sure a child attends school is not only a family responsibility, it is also a legal obligation closely monitored by the state. The country enforces a law on parental responsibility for raising and educating children, meaning parents may be fined or face intervention from authorities if their child repeatedly misses classes, drops out of school, or fails to complete a basic education. From the government's perspective, a lack of discipline at home can lead to school abandonment, behavioral problems, and other social issues. So parents are held responsible not only for academic progress, but also for their child's conduct, attendance, and activities outside the classroom. The law also restricts children under 18 from visiting certain religious institutions outside school hours or appearing at entertainment venues late at night. This means a child's daily life may be monitored from the classroom to the places they visit after school. For many Westerners, this may seem like excessive government interference in private family life. But in remote mountain regions, still facing serious hardship, authorities see it as a way to force every household to place education first. Behind that strictness lies a clear objective: ensuring that the next generation is not left behind because the adults responsible for them failed to care. As night settles over the mountain villages, somewhere a phone is announcing that money has arrived from Russia. Somewhere else, a woman is still waiting for her husband to return time. And in another home, a family is spreading out the dastarkhan to invite a stranger to share tea and plov. This is Tajikistan, a country that cannot be explained by poverty or magnificent mountains alone. Behind every separation is still a family trying to keep moving forward, and behind every shared meal is a sense of dignity that hardship has not been able to take away. Tell us in the comments what you will remember most about Tajikistan. Like the video and subscribe to continue traveling with us to places that rarely appear on the tourist map.